Nik Markevicius wrote today's story called Expecting. Nik V. Markevicius is an old-school weirdo in the tradition of Animaniacs, The Muppets, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He creates unusual fiction through various means, including genre mashup, mad science, and the subtle alteration of reality via secret benevolent means. If you're crying foul at this point, you've hit the truth square on the head. He is also head of the Fox Valley Writers Group based in North Aurora, Illinois. Find out more at Today we're doing his story called Expecting. Pete stood, scowling, in the bustling maternity ward central hallway, catching wary glances from nurses, new parents, everyone. Rage and embarrassment flushed his cheeks and neck beet red. He could barely breathe. Part of him said, "Turn around, go back to the room where Sam was now having their first baby alone." But he knew what would happen. Another part said, "Follow the signs. Go to the traditional waiting room." He could pace and fondle the cigar the boys at work gave him. Instead, he cut through the nurse's station to the elevator. A woman called his name, but he ignored it until he was inside, slumped against the wall and punching a button at random. Need some air. The elevator lurched upwards, and he snorted. Where was this air? The helipad? Pete kept up the grim smile until the door opened on a dormant nightmare. 1 minute, he was staring at an unkempt, hollow-eyed version of his skinny frame in the mirrored elevator door. The next, the terminus of a familiar hallway. It ran off to the left, along the edge of the hospital. Windows filled the corridor with light and supplied a long view, the almost urban downtown district of Chicago's elder near west suburbs. To his right, Pete saw clusters of chairs in the waiting room he remembered well, but not fondly. The carpet was gray, not the turquoise he remembered, but the walls, the print on them, even the mixed aroma of nervous sweat and sterilizing chemicals, it dragged him back in time, shrinking him, wrapping his mind in a numbing cloud he had forgotten on purpose. The elevator began closing. Pete almost left this snapshot in the past, but his hand moved, and the door slid back, and then he was walking fast down that hallway. Ignoring the check-in order on the posted sign, he pushed through a pair of swinging doors. They made a thump and a whoosh that dragged him back to childhood, to holding his mother's cold hand as she sobbed and led him this very way. 2 more turns brought him before the closed door of room 624. The whiteboard nameplate was as empty as the basket for charts and paperwork. So he pushed down the handle as his head tingled and his vision shimmered around growing incandescent spots. Pete exhaled in a gasp. He drew more oxygen, felt marginally better, and shoved the door open. The hinge squealed. His heart pounded like double bass drums at a heavy metal concert. The tingles ran out of his head and crawled across his skin. He gritted his teeth, closed his eyes, and walked in blind, just 2 steps, and waited until the door bonked off of a hidden stopper and swung shut behind him. Only then did he open his eyes. White walls, drop ceiling insert with fluorescent lights currently off. Sterile, shiny tile floor supporting a bed haloed with unused equipment ports set into the wall. The machinery he remembered from his last visit to this room had been wheeled elsewhere, perhaps saving lives, perhaps just delaying the inevitable. But otherwise, memory and perception were one. Melinda. Heart jumping into his throat, Pete found a tall vinyl chair in the corner. It faced the room's only window. A gray head of hair poked over the top. When he could swallow, he said, "That's my mother's name." No kidding. The man cocked his head, but didn't turn or rise. Pete's nose wrinkled. A faint smell wafted to him, at once as familiar and as foreign as a dream. What? He caught himself and shook his head. What's that smell? Is that what I was going to say? Instead, he cleared his throat. Listen, I didn't know anybody was in here. I'm sorry to bother you. Oh, you didn't. I've just been waiting. Tensing, Pete thought. This is where he turns around and points a gun at me and says, "I've been waiting for fresh meat," or something like that. The old man sighed, but he didn't turn from his eastward view of orange pre-dusk sunlight on the parking lot, and beyond that, more squat suburb apartments and offices. I've been waiting a long time. That smell got stronger in Pete's nose. Memory tickled on the edge of perception, elusive, still dreamlike, but closer. Yeah, I know the feeling. Do you? My wife's giving birth downstairs. The man's head turned enough to reveal a beak of nose and an eye which glittered somehow in the gloom. He smiled. Well, congratulations. Pete shifted from foot to foot, uncomfortable in the man's unblinking gaze. Thanks. How come you're up here? A laugh barked out, surprising him as it released knots in his shoulders and back. Offering a wan smile, Pete said, I fainted. No kidding. Twice. The old man whistled. During the actual birth, the pushing? More chuckles, but they were laced with a bit of hysteric worry. 5 minutes ago, he'd been fuming mad, and now he was laughing about it with a stranger. No, Pete said before leaning a hand against the wall. I'm not squeamish. When I get nervous or excited, sometimes I forget to breathe. And then you faint. Yep. Shaking his head, smiling more honestly now, he said, the first time, I just about bounced off the floor. I bonked my funny bone and came back to myself screaming. Bet that went over well. Yeah. The doc's looking at me. We're not even at the squishy part yet. The nurse wants to examine me. I say, I'm fine. Get out the camcorder and start filming. And it happened again? I caught a close-up of my wife's face while she was having a contraction. She took up the whole frame, all sweaty and contorted, and you know. Yes, I do. After that, they kicked me out. Pete let his whole body sag against the wall as frustration rose up in him again. My first daughter's being born right now, and I can't even be in the room. He cringed at his own vehemence, but the old man in the dark didn't react to the language as he kept looking over his shoulder. Well, I can't go anywhere just yet either, son. What do you say we wait together? Queer thoughts ran at Pete over the next few seconds. Was this guy an escape from the psych ward? Some hobo off the street looking for a little warmth, or a score of pharmaceuticals? And just what was that smell? Stronger than ever. He thought about finding his own private place to hole up, but beneath the jitters and the edge of a third fainting spell hovering like a trap in the fuzzy edges of his vision, he knew he'd wind up down on the second floor, causing a scene. He'd pass out again, complete the trifecta, and then they'd probably sedate him, and then he'd miss everything. Instead of that mess, he took another step into the room and sat at the foot of the bed. Stiff sheets crackled beneath him, but even the expelled scent of industrial soap couldn't completely banish that getting stronger smell in his nose. Sort of like lemon, sort of like the ocean. Pete's mind spun through memories. Where is that from? To the old man, he said, "Yeah, why not?" His companion winked and turned back to the window, leaning forward so he could see down into the parking lot. "It won't be long," he said softly. Pete had no idea if that was rhetorical, but he answered anyway. "That's true." We were just getting to the breathing and closing in contractions. The part where you turn the camcorder off. Ah, shit. Huh? The camcorder. I never turned it off. There won't be any part left for later. Son? Pete paused on the verge of getting up. What? Since we're both here, want to tell me what's really bothering you? You know, before you charge down there and get tossed out the front doors? The nervous tension in Pete receded just as fast as it came on. It made him think of waves smacking at the shoreline. Further, it occurred to him how natural that swing had become lately. And that made him sink back down, put his elbows on his knees, and clasp his hands between his legs. You really want to hear it? We've got the time. Later, you'll be too busy. Nerve stretched Pete tight all over again. See, that's the thing right there. It's not a problem exactly, but he took a deep breath of that peculiar smell, as close to memory as to dream, and tried to arrange his racing thoughts. You don't want to be a father? No, I mean, yes, I do, but he grimaced, then wadded up the whole line of thought which had been consuming him since Sam showed him that little stick with the plus sign on it. Everybody tells me about this and that what's going to happen, what it is like to be, but I can't relate. I have no idea what to do. The old man looked over his shoulder again. Every new dad says that. No, you don't get it. I'm good with babies. Little kids, even teenagers love me. My wife has got lots of cousins, and they all love me. But it's different when you don't get to go home after a while. You're worried about the day-to-day. Yes, I even know why. I don't have any examples in my memory. Pete wrung his hands so hard his knuckles popped, then made himself stop. My father died suddenly when I was real young, like 4. I remember bits of him, but not stuff like he was with my mom or me. Beyond those random memories every little kid has. And after he was gone, it was always just Mom and me, and that's not the same. The old man mused. What's a dad supposed to do when the kid starts kindergarten? What happens when he goes on his first date or gets in a bad spot? That sort of thing. Exactly. Cold relief splashed on Pete like water on a feverish face. 10 million other things, too. My wife's father? He's one of those dudes. Football and horsepower and power tools. We talk, but, he laughed, we talk, but not like this. I'm having an easier time talking to a stranger about important stuff. With him, if you're barbecuing, you talk sauces and charcoal versus propane. You're driving, it's about the sound. Only he can hear. That means X is out of whack or Y is about to go wrong. It's all he knows. The old man said nothing. Pete let his silence hang. His muscles relaxed a degree at a time, and the loss of tension felt exquisite. How far did I wind myself up? Everybody's ignorant, said the old man, when they're a dad for the first time. Everybody worries and feels like you do, even if they've had the usual 2 parents there all their lives. He chuckled, and that lemony sea smell was suddenly everywhere, filling the room. Lord knows I could barely breathe the first time the nurse put my son in my arms. I think I felt the way you looked when you came in here. Pete snorted. Like I was about to heave? Something like that. Both of my folks were around, and I still felt exactly the way you described. The only thing I know is you can't know. You never know. You just trust yourself and you wing it. You read some books and talked to the doctors, right? Yeah. You have friends with kids? Nope, we're the first. Well, you'll manage. You love your wife. Really love her? I do. Pride swelled warm in Pete's chest. Then you'll love your kid. You'll find a way. The old man turned back to the window. It's that simple, even though it never feels like it. Just promise me something, son. A ghost of a smile curled Pete's lips. What's that? Don't dwell on this. You never know how long you get to be a parent. Things happen. He trailed off, muttering, and sagged a little in the chair. Pete's head whirled. That smell receded as he thought of Sam and the baby, his baby. What the hell am I doing here? That's the real question. He smiled big and broad, like he used to before he caught himself in the mirror, all creased and tight with worry. The smile spread inward, and he felt good. Not ready, no way, but prepared. Sure, I can say that. I'm going to be a dad. He could say that, too. He got to his feet, rolled his shoulders, and drew big, cleansing breaths. A thought occurred to him. Small, and should have been obvious, but then again, he wasn't in a position to see even a few minutes ago. You know, we've been here for 10 minutes, and I've been really selfish. I never asked what you're doing here." The old man flushed a quick smile, then turned back to the window. The buildings and the parking lot below had slipped into deep shadow as sunset dissolved into twilight. That smell came on again, strong, and it finally clicked in Pete's head. Quiet, except for the birds and the squirrels and the wind in the trees. A hush so thick it was almost touchable as he sat in front of a headstone, surrounded by other headstones, listening to his mother cry as she brushed debris away from the etched name and pair of dates. He smelled it there, always, after a while, and he always thought, "Dad's visiting." He leapt to his feet. The tingles roared back, and the iridescent spots blighted his vision. The world grew distant, leached of color and substance. The old man held Pete's eyes. "I thought I told you. I was waiting for Melinda. She's just become a grandmother, you see." Gooseflesh crawled up Pete's arms. He couldn't breathe. He took a step toward the old man and reached out, wanting to touch him, turn him, to see if... The door clunked open, and Pete whirled around. There stood the maternity nurse, wiping a scowl off her face as her hands propped themselves on her hips. "Thank God," she said. "We've been looking all over." She shook herself, closed her eyes for a long moment, and put on an honest show of care and composure. "It's not important. You should come with me right now. Your 3 ladies are waiting." 3? Pete looked over his shoulder. The chair stood empty, facing the bed. Of the old man, there was no sign. He looked back at the nurse, who struggled with her smile as she said, "Yes, your wife, your daughter, and your mother just arrived."